Welcome, everybody. My name is Dave Keating. I'm a senior writer for the website energymonitor.ai. I'm going to be guiding us through this portion of the day's discussions. This is an issue that is very important both to the industry and to policymakers, both at European and national level. And it's actually something that has been thought about for a very long time, even prior to the new EU energy efficiency rules, and also before energy security became such a predominant issue at the moment. There was already efforts in place. Data centers in Europe, most operators of data centers in Europe had pledged to make their infrastructure climate neutral by 2030. And so to achieve this goal, we have now the commitment as part of the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact to a range of sustainability goals covering energy efficiency, use of green power, water use, recycling, and reuse of waste heat. So on this panel, we're going to discuss concrete steps already taken, as well as commitments and challenges to come. And as we know, challenges are a big issue in the energy sphere at the moment. So we're going to be talking about how these commitments have been affected by the new energy realities that we're facing right now, and what innovations are ahead for sustainability of data centers. Now let me introduce you to the panelists that we have to discuss all of the issues that were just outlined there. To my right, we have Michael Winterson, Managing Director at data center company Equinix and Chairman of the European Data Center Association. Then next to him, we have Anna Klaft, Chairwoman of the German Data Center Association. Next to her, we have Robert Nuij, Deputy Head of Unit for Energy Efficiency at the European Commission's Energy Department. We have Conor Molloy, Senior Product Manager at Bureau Veritas, which provides testing, inspection, and certification services. And finally, we have Fabrizio Garrone, Solution Director for Aruba Enterprise, an Italian data center and hosting company. Thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to hear from the Pact signatories first, and then we'll go to Robert to hear more about the Commission's vision for 2030. Michael, let's start with you. So everybody will have their own kind of idea about how to get to this goal, and everyone's, now that the goal has been set, it's the question of how do we actually get there. How do you see achieving the goal of the Pact, the climate neutral data centers, by 2030? What will be the means to get there?
So if we think about the European Data Center Association members, all of us participated and worked with CISP on the creation of the Pact, and I think it was important that we think about how many members actually got behind drafting the Pact, and that's why we had such a big group of people signing on right off the bat. The success rate was phenomenal, both across the board in the IT space and the cloud space. If I look at Equinix, as we were internally discussing, hey, this is coming, we're signing up to this, what are we gonna do about it? What we realize is that sustainability has become a mission critical feature function of the operations of data centers because our customers insist on it. And so I'm shocked and pleasantly surprised that there isn't a department inside of our company that doesn't have someone responsible for the sustainability element of that department. From design to operations to building to staffing to procurement, every one of them is looking at this problem. So it has been a fundamental shift in our mindset. It was annoying in the past. Now it's become part of running an efficient business. And it's because our customer demands.
Yeah, it makes sense. From annoying to being very central.
Yeah, absolutely central.
Mission. Anna, what about you? How do you see the means to reach this goal?
So GDA is part of the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact, I would say, since the beginning, since the very beginning, since the first day, I think it appeared somewhere. And you know, the data center industry has a strong commitment to become carbon neutral by 2030 because they are committed and because, of course, the world is going digital as well. So self-regulation from our point of view is a good framework to develop solutions together with other companies, and self-regulation, for example, in Germany, is really going into regulation normally. So we want to give, so as I'm speaking for German Data Center Association, we want to give our members the opportunity to participate in the working groups which we have. So without first committing themselves. I would call it that way, because if they see in the next step that the goals which are set there, they are achievable, then they can and they will also commit themselves to them. So we are trying to get the industry excited about this issue and get more involvement into it. And just to answer your question on the carbon neutrality until 2030, so Germany has already something. It's called public energy efficiency register. It's kind of a transparency register for data centers, and it puts a lot of pressure, of course, on operators. We agree on that, but our ministries. They want to see where we stand and how we act, and in a sustainable manner, I mean. And also the end clients, they want to see who is doing what on this sustainable manner, and who I want to join in the future, like regarding, so when I'm looking for an operator. And I think Ditte just mentioned that the EED will do this kind of monitoring as well. So my question would be, of course, this is already a good measure in Germany, so why don't we do it, I don't know, why haven't we started it on the higher level, on the European level? Why are we doing like this, we call it in Germany, island solutions, right? So why like that? So overall, I see that as GDA, who's representing really the industry, we want really to believe we will achieve the goal, so we are really still excited to be part of the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact.
Conor, key to meeting this goal will be auditing and certification. How do you see the means to get to the 2030 goal?
Yeah, well, it starts from, we've developed an audit framework by collaboration with the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact. So we have mapped out the means to compliance for data center operators by recognizing mainly European standards, American standards, and international standards. And that process then would start from the data center operators monitoring, recording, and reporting the process. And then that would be independently verified by Bureau Veritas. And we also recognize the Code of Conduct for Data Center Efficiency, but obviously we focus on mainly the standards, and I said, well, that's international standards or European standards, because in that way, then by default, your best practices are probably already covered by following the standards. And this is a process that will be continual, because obviously we know that taxonomy regulation now is come into effect, but there's still some points to be sorted out on the energy efficiency directive. So we'll be working with all the Pact members to map that process, and then if there's anything else comes up in CSRD, we'll also be mapping that. But it will be a continual process that will start from, the very early stages of reporting. And in addition to that, then the other service that how we can support the industry is by performing a gap analysis. So we could go in potentially before a deadline to assess a company, see where they're aligned and where potentially they're not aligned. So that means it gives a data center operators time to put some corrective actions in place before a deadline is there for compliance.
Fabrizio, how do you see the path to attaining the 2030 goal?
Yeah, we know that the data centers are the factory of the digital age. They run all the planet digital services. And we often told that digital data has a minimal environmental or ecological footprint. But this is not true, because storing, moving, processing, analyzing data require a lot of energy. And then we can move, and two things matter if we want to reach this objective. One is use of renewable energy, and other is growing up the energy efficiency. And we know that this is a challenge process. As we are Aruba, since many years ago, we are moving towards this objective, playing an active role in many projects that are related to green investment. And when the Pact is born, we we found in the mission of the Pact exactly what we believe of since many years. So we believe that this is a historical commitment for the European cloud provider, but not only that together can work concretely to reach this objective. So we immediately embraced this initiative because, in the end, as I said, is exactly matched with what we are doing since many years ago.
So, Robert, we've just heard 4 different conceptualizations of the pathway to 2030. From the Commission's perspective, what is the pathway to reaching this 2030 goal? And I wonder if you could also respond to Anna's point about making sure that we have solutions at EU level.
Sure. So I think it's multiple approaches. I think that the Pact is a very good approach. I mean, self-regulation is not something that we are necessarily against, especially if it's in a sort of a front-runner mode. So that's very, very important. And as Dieter said, we are very pleased that the Pact has happened and that there are people signing up to it and that progress is being made here. Of course, the Pact will, being voluntary, not capture everybody. And that's where, from our perspective, regulation could play a role. So to also bring on board or to force others that might not automatically or by themselves come to the table, to force them also into a framework for, in the first instance, reporting on their energy efficiency, on their renewables, on their use of waste heat, et cetera, and then subsequently considering further regulatory steps to actually improve the energy performance of those data centers that are, in this case, not covered by the Pact itself.
Well, you mentioned the regulatory framework and how that could kind of fill in the gaps for the Pact. Let's talk a little bit about the Energy Efficiency Directive, which Dieter just mentioned there, which is going to be very important for data centers. Michael, from your vantage point, how will the revision of the EED affect European data centers and the industry, especially I'm thinking of legacy data infrastructures and enterprises, data centers. What's going to be the impact there?
Well, I have an answer for that, but just I want to pick up something you just said. I want to give everybody here a little story that hopefully will ring true about why regulation and self-regulation actually work together really, really well. We have a member of our European Data Center Association who signed up to the Pact, who had made an acquisition and had to retrofit, so this does get into your question, had to retrofit a set of data centers. They raised 100 million euros to retrofit the data centers to be able to hit the 2030 target the Pact had assigned. However, they used the regulations underneath the EU taxonomy for sustainable finance to actually raise the money, and they actually achieved a 20 million euro savings over the cost of that debt and the lifetime of the debt from the bank by using the regulation. So regulation and industry direction actually work in a positive, can work in a positive cycle. And this is, just want to give you a little story that shows how the two work together. Industry wants to go somewhere. Regulators support that by providing the regulations that allow us. So if you think about it, we're going through a once-in-a-lifetime change from an unregulated to regulated industry. There's a lot of good behind this. So if I look at the Energy Efficiency Directive, there's a lot of good. We've worked very closely with DG Ener, negotiating with and arguing and disputing and challenging how we craft legislation. So generally speaking, I think it's great. If I look at the very story I just told you, legacy data centers are also committed to hitting these 2030 targets. I know from, if I put my Equinix hat on, I know that we are investing millions of euros in retrofitting old data centers to be able to hit these targets. We've given ourselves slightly longer time in the Pact for legacy data centers. For an enterprise data center, I think the key issue here is it really comes back to what level of data centers are we measuring. Dieter referenced 100 kVA as a limit, which will capture most major corporations in Europe. If we actually end up with a higher level, we're looking at about 500, you're probably talking about only the most largest of banks and service provider companies. And to be fair, we're meeting with them and they are having serious problems. This is going to be hard. They have data centers that will probably cost them tens of millions of euros to retrofit. And they need solutions, and we have the answer. Move to co-location, move to cloud. That's so regulation is actually quite a good thing then.
And they're working hand in hand because preparations for retrofitting were already being made with the Pact.
Well, they're having the problem, you mentioned sustainability reporting directive. They're already seeing that they're going to have to report. And for most service businesses, IT is one of their biggest and largest carbon emission problems. So,
Fabrizio, what's your vision of this for the Energy Efficiency Directive? And in particular, I wonder for you guys as operator of data centers, if it makes geography a consideration, because we know that there's going to be a big increase in the energy demand for data centers. That puts a big responsibility or a big draw on local power infrastructure. You guys are mainly based in Milan, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So when you're planning, do you think about the geography of where these data centers go based on what's now being laid out in the EED revision?
Yeah, you are right. We are based the closest to Milan, but we are also opening another big campus in Rome. So for us, geography is something that is important. For sure, our vision is based on a green by design data center. So this means that before building a data center and before to choose where to build this data center, we have to strategically choose where the location and all the impact that we can have building on that location. Not only regarding the impact on the grid, but also trying to use as much we can the renewable energy power that we can find there, and then we can use. Not only renewable energy sources, but also innovative cooling system, like using geothermal system and so on. This approach let us also to reduce the impact on the grid that will have building the data center in this land. For sure, this cannot be the only approach because I don't know what's happening in the other country, but especially in Italy, the regulation is something quite complex, but this is usually our main focus, to reduce at the minimum level the impact on the green and use as much as we can the renewable sources that we can find.
Anna, what about in Germany? Are there similar effects that you're expecting from the EED for German data centers?
Well, I can say only a political opinion on that. Like I said before, EED, it will be transported kind of into a national law, right? So in Germany, the directive is already kind of a law or will be a law. And we see it now with our energy efficiency. It's not called yet law, but it's something like that, right? And in Germany, our laws are more stricter and not just a directive, right? So we are really fighting here on this matter. So, and the challenge for everybody, especially operators, will be in the end to follow different requirements set on a national level, right? So again, the question, why can't we use the same criteria? Like, why can't we use EED also for Germany? Why is it so impossible to be more consistently on this? Because in the end, it will be like, I don't know, Iran, who will be the first green country, like a fight everywhere, you know? So this is my opinion, and I think we should be more aligned on that topic. So this is just a political opinion from my side.
So Robert, we've heard some of the challenges there, some of the new responsibilities. How is the Commission envisioning how the EED is going to affect data centers?
Well, we hope that it's a turning point for the data center sector. And of course, we are starting small in the sense that the requirements that are currently in place, or that will be soon in place, there was indeed a political agreement about 10 days ago between the European Council and the Parliament on the directive. That means for data centers that the threshold has gone up to 500 kilowatts. That's now agreed, which brings with it its own challenges, and we can maybe dig into that later. But what we're aiming to do is, in fact, exactly this, is to put in place at European level a single framework initially for the reporting of data centers, of the relevant information. We have started already, and many of you have been involved in the work that we're doing with consultants to come up with this reporting framework that will be laid down in a delegated act, in legislation, and that means that every data center operator will have to report that data in that fashion. So that will basically create this level playing field. Once we get that data, we will start analyzing it. We will start looking at, well, what is happening in this sector and whether we, on the back of that data, can build, for example, minimum requirements in this sphere. But that's a second step.
You mentioned reporting obligations there. So let's talk a little bit about the auditing framework. Conor, can you explain to us how the Pact signatories are right now going to demonstrate compliance with the sustainability criteria in the Pact? How is that going to work?
Yeah, well, the process has already started. So data center operators have already started monitoring, recording, reporting internally. And also to have a defined set of metrics to work from. So that creates a level playing field for small operators or large operators, provided to follow the criteria laid out. And then when the data center operators are ready, we will independently audit and verify the reports that's created. So, and again, we will be referencing the international codes and standards and the recognized key performance indicators, metrics. So that means that once we complete our report, we know that if we're doing reports against two different data center operators, we know that we've used the same criteria to verify the data produced. So that means that when the report is issued, that it's all measured to the same set of metrics.
What are the benefits to establishing that kind of auditing framework, particularly with a voluntary pledge? Are there benefits to the companies involved for having that framework?
Yes, there is, because the framework that we've developed with the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact is very broad-based. As I mentioned earlier on, it recognizes all the known standards, whether they're international standards, European standards, or in some cases, American standards, ASHRAE standards. And it also built into it is guidelines on how data center operators can comply. So it is, once they go into the detail of the framework, there is guidance built into it of how they should comply. So again, the advantage of everybody working off the framework is that wherever the operator is, they'll all have to comply to the same criteria, or, maybe in some cases, parts are not relevant, but either way, they'll have one set of, questions and answers that they go through. So it just creates a level playing field, which makes let's say, the end report more valid.
And can I riff on that for a second? Sorry, and it also touches on what you said. So most of us in this room have some form of a sustainability program, and many of us that are international are dealing with the headache of inconsistent definitions of sustainability. In fact, when the European Green Deal came out and Europe Fit for the Digital Age, Europe was the first area to talk about the concept of climate neutral. And climate neutral for ICT was never even defined. And so the idea is that as a group, we got together and laid down our weapons where we were competitors and where we were customers and suppliers. We basically agreed to share the frustrations of trying to define standards with which you define climate neutral. So it's a mission critical issue. We need it for our children, we need it for our customers, we need it for the planet, but we don't have consistent standards. And so even arguing over, well, how do we measure efficiency? How do we measure renewable energy? Do we or do we not include nuclear power? We're not going to have that conversation now.
Let's park that.
But these are things that we as a group are openly discussing outside of our day job of trying to buy and sell to each other or compete against each other. And I find that like one of the most exciting things. It's in my career. I've never experienced this, where we've been able to discuss. And then that expertise comes to some consensus, which we can then share with someone like DG Enter and say, well, this is what we think we can do. And you validate it, of course. You test us and test us again, and that's great. But at least we're working together on defining the standards of regulation. But I am very afraid of still different country-level definitions. I'll give you an example, just because there isn't a French person on the panel here. We're dealing with RCEP and ADEME right now, and we're responding to several consultations where they're looking at measuring us by square meters, not by power capacity. This is going to fundamentally create a whole new reporting metric. And what are we going to do? How do we work together to solve that problem? It will be a cost and a burden if we don't solve that problem.
Fabrizio, you've been on the other side of the auditing process that we were just talking about. I think you guys were one of the first to go through the auditing process for the Pact. What was that like, going through the auditing process?
Yeah, exactly the motivation.
He's smiling.
I guess it was good.
Exactly the motivation that Michael said before, because as I told before, we always build our data center with zero impact. With this in mind, Aruba infrastructure are green by design, working since by design and the project. And for this reason, we are firmly convinced that the Pact is a key initiative and have the possibility, as Michael said, to share together with our player. It doesn't matter competitor or not competitor, but we are in the same arena. For us, it's been a key point, especially we wanted to be one of the first company that we challenged with the auditing framework. For us, is another demonstration of our commitment, because we was already on the track to do this. And regarding the auditing framework, let us to have a discussion with the other player and have the possibility to demonstrate our commitment, but not only, also our results.
When you're talking to other companies that are going to be going through the auditing process, what would be your tips, recommendations for them, having been one of the first to go through it?
Yeah.
Bad joke.
Good joke.
For sure, the other company have to consider this framework as a critical asset to demonstrate their commitment, because we debate just before this roundtable that the activity during the last year doing by the Pact that has produced this auditing framework permit us to move up from the words and discussion to the fact. So. And the auditing framework is a concrete, real asset that can demonstrate our effort and our commitment. And then it's not so hard to reach this auditing, because more or less all the company, from the biggest to the smallest, have some certification on the roadmap. They will be obliged to reach some certification. So if they are already used to reach some standard certification or some compliant to some commission regulation, reaching also the auditing is something that is quite easy. The other thing is that for us is making relevant is to gain the support from a company like Bureau Veritas that can help them, this company, through the Pact. And the last one is that using this auditing framework led to the company also to verify and assess the compliance to the other, a wider range of other recommendation, like Energy Efficiency Directive, taxonomy, and others. So it's another collateral effect that could help this company to verify their compliance to the other regulation.
Let's go back to this question of how voluntary or self-regulatory initiatives fit in with the EU regulatory framework, particularly the the EED. Robert, when we're in the overall vision of the Green Deal, how do these types of self-regulatory initiatives fit in with the planned regulation? And looking at the Pact in particular, do you think there are lessons for other industries on how voluntary self-regulatory initiatives can work with the Green Deal and also work hand in hand with regulation?
Sorry, my voice is going for some reason. I think self-regulatory action is very important in a sort of a front-runner situation. So, as you said, I mean, the sector hasn't really had to deal with this. It's being confronted from all sides with requests. And to come together and do this on a voluntary basis is a very good approach, I think. So I think that is to be applauded, and other sectors have done that in the past. I've been involved in, for example, energy labeling regulations, and there we saw that the white goods sector had a voluntary labeling scheme. And we built our regulatory labeling scheme on the back of that. So it's a way of sorting through some of the problems and then bringing it also to the table for legislators. And it is a question I think I would also turn upside down. I mean, we have now something which is some provisions in a directive, but of course this needs to be implemented. And this needs to be given hands and feet. And there I think we have to continue to collaborate, also to build upon your experiences. And if you have suggestions for what not or what to do and how to deal with some of these very technical problems when it comes to defining the scope, et cetera, then we are very happy to continue that collaboration and to make sure that we create synergies with what you are already doing so that it doesn't become another reporting burden on top of what you already have put in place. That might not always be possible, but I think we should work together to try and avoid overlap and increase the synergies there.
Well, yeah, let me put that to you, Michael. How do you envision the Pact working alongside? I mean, there are many different European regulations that are affecting this area. You've got sustainable taxonomy, the EED, the energy digitalization strategy. So how can the Pact work with that regulatory structure, and what would be your recommendations that Robert is asking for?
Well, the first thing is to recognize that just because the Pact started out as a self-regulatory initiative and then we became regulated, the Pact's not destroyed, because at the core of what the Pact was about was an agreement by our industry to discuss the issue of achieving sustainability. And so our ability to define what it is and then our ability to set these targets is still critical and will be necessary for any future legislation in country or across Europe. So that's going to be a key function, and that will continue. So the Pact will definitely have that as a key function. The other one, many people don't recognize that, but the Pact always from the beginning had a secondary role, which was to define a policy statement. There's only so much that we can do by ourselves. So we also made a statement back into the European Commission and to national government saying, these are things that we think you can do to help the system be more sustainable. And so I think that role still continues. And that actually is really helpful because the Pact has 24 different national trade associations and international organizations already signed up, and this will grow. And all of us are agreeing to lobby towards these same policy standards. And that should hopefully make your life a lot easier.
Anna, how do you view the role of the Pact interacting alongside all of these regulations we're talking about?
Yeah, so the obligations for data center operators in the law and guidelines or directives, I think, are highly difficult to achieve, and the Pact's role can be to translate these difficulties from the economical and also practicability point of view, and of course to the EU Commission, or just create a framework maybe for further discussions as well. So I think the Pact should be kind of a helping hand or sparring partner, maybe something like that, for the EU to explain the needs of the industry. Say what?
Fight, sparring partner.
Sparring partner,
I
yeah.
like it. It's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
it should be,
There you
because
go.
I call it sparring partner.
I like it.
In Germany, we are sparring partner
No,
to the
that's
policymakers. Sparring partner to the EU to explain, of course, the needs of the operators and also make suggestions, maybe also for simplifications, for example, on how factors can be more measurable, right? And I think that the task of the Pact, I see it as an impact to develop ambitious but also practical targets this is maybe the most important part, which can be transferred as norms and principles into laws later or directives, or used as key figures to implement into, for example, EU taxonomy. And so since the targets of the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact working groups were developed with a major knowledge of the top members of the industry, it's much more likely that that they will also stand up, existent, and be implementable. So I see, I see that the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact should defend EU objectives and try to help the EU. I think to set international standards instead of course, like I said, dealing with every country's own laws, right? So,
Robert, I mentioned at the beginning the new focus on energy security, that is a big preoccupation at the moment. How do you think that changes the dynamics of looking at data centers, energy efficiency? Has that changed the calculation at all?
Well, it has changed the calculation in a broader sense. Outside of data centers, it has changed the calculation at an economic level, at the European economic level, because of this drive to get rid of our dependence of, in particular, Russian imported fossil fuels. So it's clear that in our work, for example, in the recovery and resilience system, the REPowerEU strategy, we are trying to push member states to do more on energy efficiency, on renewables, to reach those objectives. And that means also that industry has to play a role there. You will have seen that the Commission has also adopted a Net Zero Industry Act the other day. This will have to go through co-decision, by the way, so it's not yet law, obviously. But also there is a recognition that more is needed for European industry to remain competitive, and that's very closely linked to high energy prices today, at least, but also to, for example, access to critical raw materials, et cetera, et cetera. And we are aiming from our side to support the transition of European industry towards climate neutrality, which at European level is a target at 2050. But of course, 2030, 2040 are important milestones to get there. And the data center sector is expected to grow, is expected to become a more important consumer of electricity and hence also renewable energy. And so the efforts on energy efficiency and making good use of the energy that is needed is extremely important.
Well, I have one more topic before I'll open it up to the audience for questions from you guys, so you can start thinking of your questions now. I want to broach the topic of greenwashing. I think that when people hear voluntary initiatives, self-regulation, they get suspicious. Is this actually just industry trying to avoid regulation? So Fabrizio, when you're talking to customers and they hear you're in this pact, do you get this pushback? Like, oh, it's a self-regulatory pact? How do you respond to this?
But the first answer is that with the auditing framework, we test the metrics, data, and process that are necessary to prove that. So this means a true effort because we have the number. Each member has to report a concrete number that are real. So this is the first answer. The second answer is that many companies, like Aruba, for instance, we recently announced the acquisition of 2 new hydroelectric plants, and now we are running with 7 hydroelectric plants. That is something concrete. They exist, and then we are using them to auto-produce energy. So I give you the example of my company, but there are many other examples, and this is our facts. And the last one is an overall consideration regarding our sector. If we compare the energy consumption increase that our sector is having during the last year, compared with the growing capacity in terms of workload capacity, the energy consumed increase is growing up lower and lower than our capacity to manage workload. And this means that greenwashing is not really true, because in case of that, the growing rate should be more or less the same.
Michael, same question to you. How would you respond to
So I'll
these
just
types?
pick up on that last point. I mean, the second bullet point in the European Green Deal's objectives is economic growth decoupled from resource utilization. I'm sorry, I don't know why I know that, but I know that. It just sticks in my head, and it's exactly your point. You look at our energy growth at, we're looking at 1.5% per year for our industry over a 12-year period. This is a big number because we consume a lot of energy, but yet we're delivering economic growth of 5 to 10% per year. So, we are truly working hard at decoupling resource utilization from economic growth. And I don't think there's any other industry I can think of that's doing that. So at the end, yes, we can be accused, and maybe some of our members are making some statements that are factually incorrect. But another way of looking at it is the ICT sector is 2 to 5% of global economy, depending on how you measure it. Well, we represent 50% of all power purchase agreements that are made worldwide. Okay, that's fact. It's fact, and you can accuse us, but we put the money on the table, and it's there. So I don't know. I guess I know in my heart what we're doing. Sometimes, and I know we're very conservative, and some people I see are out there maybe making slightly bolder statements. But I think in general, our industry is absolutely moving in the right direction. So I'll push back.
Those slightly bolder statements could run afoul of the proposal that just came out 2 hours ago from the European Commission on greenwashing that's going to set standards and also verification requirements for green claims. So that this is very much a live issue for sure, as that proposal is going to work its way through the legislative process. Let me see if there's any questions from the audience for the panelists. Does anyone have a question for the panel? Feeling shy. Okay, I have another question then, and then I'll check again with you if you want to think some more. Anna, in terms of tools that would be helpful for data centers' efforts to accelerate sustainability and achieve this goal, what kind of tools do you need from policymakers or elsewhere?
What kind of tools? Maybe a general answer. Tools. I think it's all about communication. Just a simple answer, because in Germany we try to put the policymakers together with the community, with the industry. So for us, we feel like it's more about communication. This is kind of a tool, and I think. If you communicate and what we are doing right now here also on this panel, I think we should do it everywhere, and so we are doing it a lot in Germany, and this is how it works, because then we get recognized, everybody starting to understand the industry, and this is actually the tools to success. This is the most important tool to success, because we can't we can't I don't know the word, but I think the policymakers, or even also the people, not everybody is aware of the data center industry itself. So what is a data center? I think sometimes we need to start from the very scratch. So on this level, it's a high level already, right? But in the countries, on the national level, they are not that far. So they don't know what they are doing. And the policymakers who are doing energy efficiency laws, they have no idea what they are doing. So I wouldn't say...
Wow. Present company excluded.
Sorry to say that, but I mean, like when we speak to them, really on the round tables, like we are shocked. We are shocked about where these questions come from, and how is this possible? They're putting numbers in some laws and don't know what they're talking about. And this is what I mean. So we try to explain to the community, like, what is actually data center? What do we need to know about the data center? And even simple question, what is waste heat?
So is part of that just as a tool, like just establishing definitions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feasibility of waste heat, that's a big one. Germans were having a hard time with that, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, good job on that. You did a good job pushing back on that one. I got two as well, which are interesting. And this is more direct legislative tools. The European PPA market is puny compared to the United States of America. Sorry. The US has been delivering 2 to 3 times the number of power purchase agreements in Europe. And the reason's simple. It's overcomplicated. There's an oligopoly of suppliers, and they're overpriced. And so we're being asked to sign up 20-year terms for power purchase agreements, and it's exceedingly hard to find cost-competitive solutions. So open up the PPA market, bring in the competition. Let's get this going. That's one. And the other one is, of course, make sure the electricity grid's ready to handle this. You know, do we have the interconnectors between countries? Do nation states have appropriate grid growth policies? Because frankly, we're worried. You know, is the grid going to handle us? And we're already seeing some stress in some of the grids across Europe. So I think that's a clear one where we want to see some commit at the national level, European level. That's definitely, that'll be a big tool. The other one is that though I work for a large operator, and though many of the members of our trade associations are large, there are many small to medium enterprises, and it's exceedingly difficult for these technology companies that are trying to grow to access sustainable tools. So we've got to come up with something. I don't know if it's a tax policy, an investment policy or something, but I don't want to see sustainability treated as a competitive differentiator, and that's how the big guys are keeping ahead. That's unfair, and we don't want that. So we need tax policies that can help small to medium enterprises access the same renewable energies that we can afford to buy directly. That'd be my two.
Conor, from an auditing perspective, what might be helpful in terms of tools from policymakers?
I think probably down the line, what would be very beneficial is that they take the audit process up to an accreditation level, you know, because that's worked in other industries where there's a defined set of criteria for the audit firms. And just to go back then to your previous question in relation to greenwashing, I mean, like that's one of the benefits of bringing in a third-party independent verification body is that, and if they're accredited, then that, you know, that if a data center operator you know, publishes results that have independently been verified, then you know that avoids any doubt in relation to greenwashing that. Because the process that Bureau Veritas uses in relation to verification of results is very vigorous. I mean, like it's literally end to end. It goes into details on the calculations, how those figures, you know, were let's say if it's power, it goes right to the source of how the figures were calculated and reported. So it's a very comprehensive process.
Fabrizio, what about you? What tools would be helpful?
I'm not so sure that I have to say something regarding what kind of tool, but for sure we need a common set of tools, as said before, that we share across the UE, and we absolutely try to avoid that each country has to define their own set, and so we making difficult to comparing. So I don't want to discuss about any tools, but we need for sure to have a common set, and this common set, as Michael said, should have to be accessible to all the company, from the biggest to SME, absolutely. So even with the support of the single country for the smallest company, if they need to invest to make them available to put in place and use this tool.
Let me just check again. Questions from the audience? Yes, we have one here.
Peter Balleby, Bureau Veritas. Maybe it's for you, Robert. The 500K limit is when Didi was up there before. How's that ambition level? Where does it come from? Is it? I mean, when we hear Didi, it should be more ambitious. So, what is the background for 500?
Yeah, that's the mystery of policymaking at the level. Yeah, well, I mean, and it's political negotiations. So Council and Parliament come together, typically at one point after midnight. They figure out that they have to come to compromises on the various articles. I mean, the energy efficiency target, the EU target for 2030 is now going to be 11.7%. Why not 12? I mean, because 11.7% was, somewhere in the middle. And I'm afraid that also in this case, that has been the logic or the illogic of the end result. So the Commission has always been an advocate in those negotiations for 100. because we feel that it's important. Not only these big data centers are important, but you have this self-regulatory measure. There is a lot of effort, and it's in particular the smaller operators that struggle and might not even know that they have to do something. So we were very keen to bring as many of those operators on board. Unfortunately, the co-legislators decided in their wisdom that it was going to be something different. So we have to work with that, and we will. This is, as I said already, this is the first step in a process, and there is no reason why in some near future we could not look again at that threshold and say, well, we've now done this, we know how it works, we know the reporting requirements, et cetera, et cetera. Let's also bring on board a larger number of smaller data centers within the framework.
We have time for one more question.
Waldhauser, Tellerhaus. Robert, just talking about the 500 kW, I think the wording is 500 kW demand. Is it contractually agreed 500 kW or actual consumption? It's only about definitions, like Anna said, communication.
Let me check the text, because I brought it with me.
Oh, perfect.
At least for that specific part. So it says, by 15 May 2024 and annually thereafter, member states shall require owners and operators of data centers in their territory with an installed IT power demand of at least 500 kilowatts to make the information set out in Annex 6A publicly available, etc., etc.
How do you define installed IT power demand?
That's a question we are now starting to work on.
Sorry to be annoying, but I mean, if I'm looking at the labels of a server, there might be 500 watts. Actually, consumption is 250 watts. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, so, well, this is one of the things that we now will have to start working on. So there is now a text, that will be in some near future, because work is still ongoing at technical level. In the meantime, we are continuing our work to start the delegated act that will lay down what all of this means. What are the definitions? What kind of renewable power do you have to report? How do you measure that? And also this rather critical element, what is 500 kilowatts?
From an operational point of view, I would favor 500 kilowatt contractual, because then I don't need to measure anything. I just need to look in the contract. Otherwise, I need to look into the IT. I need to check the consumption, whatever. Contract is contract. That's easy. That doesn't change on a daily basis. So that would be my personal wish.
Good. Good to know.
You need to write it down.
I know it's not 1 minute after midnight.
It's not. But no, but I mean, and hence also my request also to the industry to maintain its involvement, because of course these are questions that we are now going to have to struggle with, and this will be not be political. This will be far more technical, because you talk directly to us, and those kind of considerations can be brought on board within the limits of the political agreement, of course.
And as usual, the Commission will have the joy of interpreting the political decisions.
Yes, and dealing with the personal wishes of lots of people.
So definitely a lot more to discuss.
And more customers are affected by that, because actual usage is 50–60% only.
Yeah.
So you get more.
Well, that's all the time we have for the panel now, but as we can see, there's lots to discuss over the upcoming coffee break. How about a round of applause for our panelists?
Thank you. Thank you.